Welcome to the Better Boards podcast series. The title of this episode is The Board's Challenge of Tackling Climate Change. Our mission at Better Boards is to contribute to creating better boards. We do this by providing clients with an evidence-based approach for board evaluations and board development programs. To fulfill our mission, we would like to give a voice to all who care about creating better boards. Chairpeople, CEOs, senior independent directors, non-executive directors, academicians, investors and regulators. All the views expressed in our podcast are the views of our podcast partners and not those of Better Boards. In each episode, you get insights from those who are at the front line. Every time you tune in, we'll help you to develop and reinvigorate your board know-how and practice with insights, creative problem solving and practical advice. New episodes are available on the first and third Thursday every month. In this episode, my interview partner is Julie Baddeley. Julie is one of the most senior directors in the UK. She has served on the boards of major organizations in the public and private sectors for more than 20 years. Julie was chair of global recruitment company Harvey Nash plc until its sale in October 2018, and is remuneration committee chair at Ubiquity plc, senior independent director of Marshall at Cambridge, and the director of Chrysalis VCT plc. Before embarking on a portfolio career, she was executive director at Woolwich plc and has been on the boards of Greggs plc, the BOC Group, Yorkshire Building Society, lottery operator Camelot, and the Department of Health. Julie is currently leading a series of initiatives with investors, scientists and advisors to help chairs and non-executive directors recognize the challenge of climate change to their business and their business impact on global warming. Julie is chair of the Chapter Zero Steering Committee and has recently become director of the Hughes Hall Centre for Climate Change Engagement at the University of Cambridge. Julie has 4 granddaughters, including 3-year-old twins. In Julie's view, this focuses her mind on the world's future, not just as regards to climate change, but also biodiversity. She sees delivering a zero-carbon economy as the biggest challenge for business in her lifetime. Thank you, Julie, so much for being part of our podcast. Julie, most recently we see a surge of interest in climate change. Climate change appears to be on the agenda of boards just now, or just recently. What were, in your views, the triggers for this?
I think things have moved massively in the last couple of years since I started working on this topic with boards. There was very little conversation about climate change on boards unless you were in an oil company or maybe an energy company. But since then, so many things have happened. I mean, the main thing I think was the IPCC report in September, October last year, which gave us a sense of urgency for the issue. So suddenly we were being told that we weren't looking at 2100, we were actually looking at having to take action at that time within 12 years. It's now 11 years, and actually a lot of the data that's coming out now suggests it's probably 5 years that we need to be taking action. So that was a major trigger. Then there've been a whole series of reviews out about board attention on this topic. There have been new corporate governance guidelines in the UK and elements of the code which have drawn attention to the legal duties of directors, which have always been there, but they're now putting a lot more focus on purpose and a long-term view. So there've been a whole range of things that have gone on, and in the meantime, investor awareness and pressure has grown hugely, and that always affects boards. Consumer consciousness has grown tremendously, and so the environment in which companies are operating is shifting substantially under their feet.
Fantastic. Now everyone talks about a greater Do you think there is something also like a greater effect for boards?
Well, I think so. I mean, I think the messages that are out there coming from a whole range of different sources are creating this context. I mean, you don't operate a company on its own in isolation. You operate within a context, whether it be your geography, your sector, your consumer base. And these messages coming out, whether it be from David Attenborough or Greta or Mark Carney at the Bank of England, or even Extinction Rebellion, who are out on the streets, that's creating an atmosphere that brings this to everyone's attention, and boards can't ignore that, so it comes into the boardroom.
You have initiated Chapter Zero. Can you tell us what Chapter Zero is all about?
So Chapter Zero is a network for non-executive directors, chairs, audit chairs, committee chairs on public quoted boards in the UK. It sits underneath an initiative, a global initiative from the World Economic Forum. WEF launched the Principles of Good Climate Change Governance for Boards back in January. And at the same time, they encouraged groups of directors around the world to form networks to promote those principles. And a group of non-executive directors, including myself, took that challenge on for the UK. So I chair that steering committee, and we've formed this network to support non-execs in their board role on this very, very difficult topic, because certainly in my experience of board work, this is probably the most difficult topic that I've ever had to deal with. And we're very fortunate in the UK because we have 4 leading big company chairmen who are helping us get this off the ground, and we have the institutions which are very significant in this area, the Chartered Accountants Institute, the CBI, the Royal Institution, Cambridge University, which is actually helping us get the movement in place, if you like, to have our network. And a final point, we only launched the network right at the end of June. So it's quite new, but we already have well over 200 members, board members of quoted businesses, and we're already running a big program of events to help them tackle the issue.
You mentioned 4 very prominent chairmen who support the initiative. Can you name them?
Yes, of course. So we have Mark Tucker, who's the chairman of HSBC, and HSBC are doing a huge amount of work in this area. We have John Kingman, who is the chairman of Legal and General Group, and particularly Legal and General Investment Management of the investor groups, one of the sort of leaders in all of this. We have Sarah Bates, who is on 2 big investment trusts, and we have David Tyler, who used to be chairman of Sainsbury's, but is now chairman of Hammerson, so a big construction infrastructure company.
Thank you so much for this. What has motivated you personally to devote time to Chapter Zero? Because it was a massive body of work.
Yes, it was. I mean, I think I have 2 motivations in this, which are they're related, but they're quite separate. One is a professional one. So, I've been a board member for 20 odd years. I've also been part of our search for economic growth for probably 40 years. So I've been in business all my life. So I do feel partly responsible for us getting to the position we're in. I read the forerunner to David Wallace Wells's book, The Uninhabitable Earth. He wrote an article that was a sort of summary that led to that book about 2 years ago, and I read it and realised just how serious the situation is. And I did do my first degree in zoology at Oxford, so I have a sort of biology background, if you like, and it really resonated. So that's the sort of professional side. But then I also have children and grandchildren, and I want children who are in no way responsible for the situation we're in to have a future and a planet that is worth living on. And as we stand at the moment, I find it difficult to see that we're going to be able to achieve that.
Thank you so much for this personal account. Why are you focusing in Chapter Zero on non-executive directors?
Well, I think the realization I had when I understood more of the science, and I did spend quite a lot of time looking at the science, and that's one of Greta's messages, of course, is don't listen to me, listen to the scientists. What I realized was that the only people who can tackle this problem fast enough and effectively are business, global business. And that's not to say that government doesn't have a huge part to play and consumers have things that they can do. But overall, the emissions come from business, and it needs business to make it possible for people to make good choices. But also the investment in the technologies that will get us out of this problem come from business. It's about capital and capital flows. So I realized it's a business issue. And if it's a business issue, it's a board issue. And having been a non-executive director of a whole range of companies, I've observed what the non-executive role is. And to me, for this particular topic, it is phenomenally important that the non-execs are on the page for this. Partly because if they don't encourage the conversation in the boardroom, it's very hard for the executives to bring the difficult data into the room for discussion. It's a very difficult topic for boards to tackle. Boards are incredibly busy and tend to be looking at a lot of very short-term issues and being driven by the need for the next reporting season. But actually this looks like a longer-term issue to a board, but actually it isn't, because we have to act now. So we're dealing with a very uncertain set of scenarios. We don't know quite how it's going to play out. We don't know how the physical changes are going to play out in terms of bad weather and flooding and all these things. We don't know how the regulatory changes are going to play out. We could get a carbon price of $200, and what would that mean? We don't know how the consumer changes are going to play out. And we don't know when all of those things are going to happen, and in what shape. So for a board to have that debate and weave that into their risk management, their strategy, that is very tough. And if you don't have the non-executive directors part of that conversation asking the right questions, I think it's very hard for a board to tackle it. And of course the chairs are fundamental to that, because they have to get it onto the agenda in the first place and create the space for a proper strategic discussion about where we're taking our company.
Very clear. What can, in your view, non-executive directors do to address the issue on the boards they serve?
Well, the premise of Chapter 0 is that as a non-executive, you need to become as well informed as you can be about this topic and how it relates to the businesses that you serve. So different people are at different levels of knowledge. Some people are very knowledgeable, but there's always more to learn. And those people tend to be on companies that are really in the middle of this space. So mining companies, massive construction companies, oil companies. But as you work through the sectors, there is a very variable level of knowledge amongst the non-execs, right through to some who still have very little understanding of the serious implication of this. And this is not just about being good for the planet. This is a business issue. This is people's pension funds. This is asset values. This is proper financial business debate. And so our view is that we all as directors, who all have to go through professional development and become more and more educated on all aspects of what's needed for running our boards, that we have a duty to become as well informed as we can be on this topic and take that into the boardroom. So in Chapter 0, we try and provide that help. So we're not a campaigning organisation. We don't go out and lobby anyone. We provide a membership structure where people sign up as individuals. They don't sign up their companies with a pledge. It's not like the 30% club where you pledged for your company. This is about me as an individual director saying I will become informed. And what Chapter 0 does is it runs a whole series of events, big, shortish briefing sessions right through to really deep dive on risk or strategy planning workshops. Some of them are sector focused, some of them are more generic. We bring in experts, we bring in academics, and we run a whole series of events. And then on our website, we also have a whole series of sort of guides to the relevant information for you as a board member. There is just so much being written about this. None of us have time to read it all. So Chapter 0 tries to extract the stuff that's going to be most useful and make it accessible to our members.
Well, I understand that you have also created a special toolkit for non-executive directors. Can you tell us a little bit more about this toolkit?
Yes, of course. I should say that everything that's being done for Chapter Zero is being done pro bono. It's all being done because people think it's important. So we're not paying people to do things for us, and we don't charge for our membership either. This is all people put their own time in. And one of the consultancies based in London and New York, called the Baddeley Partnership, they have a pro bono program for their consultants to do things that are good for the world. And they felt that the skills that some of their consultants had would be well applied to helping us put together the toolkit. So we have a toolkit for non-execs, and the intention is to give people a reasonably short cut into knowing what you need to know to play your role on a board. So the toolkit has 3 parts. It has an overview section, and it is quite long. It's sort of 65 pages of bullet point information, but there's an overview which tackles all aspects of the science, the reporting requirements and the voluntary reporting, target setting, the sort of background that you need as a non-exec on any other topic. We've tried to do that for climate change. And then there are 2 other parts that relate. One is a sort of self-assessment that a non-exec can use to assess how well they think their companies are doing and how far they think they are on the journey. So they can do that individually. No one sees the results. It's for them alone. And then there's a sort of additional assessment based on the same questions, but that could be used for the board as a whole, maybe with a facilitator, so that the board can test whether everybody is aligned on where they think the company is and where the company wants to get to on this journey of both, dealing with the adaptation for climate change, looking at the risks, looking at the opportunities, but also looking at the company's need to reduce emissions and do the right thing for the planet.
Can you tell us a little bit more about the areas that are assessed in this questionnaire? When I looked at it, I saw different colors, different icons. Maybe you can shortly highlight each area.
Well, we tried to look at the sort of questions that you would look at in other topics when you're dealing with the board. So things like, what are your investors saying about this? What are the investors asking for? What does your remuneration strategy say about the topic? How are you dealing with it in your company's strategy? What type of reporting? So the things a director would recognise as being the sort of questions they would ask themselves about cybersecurity, for example, which is another topic we've all had to get our heads around. The same sorts of questions, but we've tried to frame those questions for this particular climate change topic. And Chapter Zero is specifically about climate change. It's not about the more general sustainable development goals that the UN have put together. That's not because we don't think the sustainable development goals are important as a whole, but because we as a group believe that if you don't get the climate change bit right, a lot of the other goals will be, it'll be impossible to achieve them. And the people who will suffer most if we don't get the climate change right are the poorest and the people in the most difficult areas of the world to live in. So we are single-minded that this is about climate change, but that's not because we don't care about things like biodiversity and loss of species or soil erosion or human rights or all the other things in the Sustainable Development Goals. We just think that climate change sits over the top. And if we don't tackle that, all the other things to do with the oceans and all of that will not be relevant, because actually we'll have warmed the planet up to the point where nothing else matters.
So if one of our listeners would like to get further information, where can they find further information?
They must go to the website. We're very proud. We have our new website. Because to start with, we were being hosted in Cambridge at one of the college's websites, which was very, very good of them. But, we wanted to have something that was specially designed for our members. So they go to www.chapterzero, all one word, chapterzero.org.uk. and that will give them the UK Chapter Zero website. But Chapter Zero has fellow chapters under the World Economic Forum in other countries. It's spreading quite slowly. So at the moment there's one in Italy and Malaysia, and they're looking to develop others in various other countries. But it's taking time, and the UK Chapter Zero is trying to be at the forefront of that movement.
Thank you ever so much, Julie. Now, if there are three things you would like our listeners to take away from this podcast, what would it be?
So the first one, and I'm quoting an investor actually who said this to me, is there is no company in any country in the world for whom this is not relevant. This is important for every sector, every company in every sector. And it's not just about buildings and flights, it's fundamental to businesses, because if it's not your own business, it will be your customers or your clients' businesses. So that's the first thing. It's relevant to all. The second thing is we do not have time to faff around with this, if I can use a very English expression. We have emissions this year in 2019, I'm sure are going to exceed last year. We're way off the Paris targets for 1.5 degrees. At the moment, we're heading for at least 4, possibly even 5 degrees, and that is catastrophic. So to turn that ship around, these companies are very big, they're global, they have huge supply chains. To turn that around takes time, and we really need to start taking action now. Otherwise, there's just not going to be time to turn it round in time. So urgency is the second point. And the third point I would say is, if you're a UK director, please join us at Chapter Zero and commit to becoming better informed. We don't ask you to do more than that, just to join our events and look at the information and start to assess your companies. And if you're not a UK director, form a WEF chapter in your country, because we need to tackle this globally. It's not a single country issue or a single company or single sector issue. It is a global issue, and if we don't work together on it, we won't be able to achieve the result.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Julie. If you care about creating better boards, and if you are a chairperson, CEO, senior independent director, non-executive director, academician, investor or regulator, and would like to be considered for contributing to our podcasts, please do get in touch and let us know. You can best reach us on info@better-boards.com. Tune in again in 2 weeks' time.